Hello and welcome back to JLXP, Week 6 LCS recap. Phreak is back for his now bi-weekly appearance after the LCS happens. You were also just coming off casting, which was probably less than 45 minutes ago. So things are fresh.
I feel like this is actually, I think I'm on the last cast almost every time. I'm thinking about it, and it's like, we were the last cast back in week 4 together. I'm pretty sure I was probably on the last cast of Sunday in week 2, so I mean, it's great. It means the games are fresh. I'm talking about ones I just did.
Yeah.
No complaints.
Yeah. And
also, I need to correct, by the way, this podcast is now the JLXD because you thought TL was going to drop only 2 games and you were wrong. So it's rebranded for this episode.
That was Pastry Time's pitch that I need to have a recurring segment called the JLXD, which is just whatever like the worst player, the stupidest thing of the week was. It's a good idea, actually. But I haven't done it. So with that, we're going to talk about week 6 of LCS, where, as you mentioned, TL lost. The 16-2 possibility is gone. What's funny is I'd brought that up originally in the post-week podcast I did with Raz because it just looked like TL was so far ahead of everybody else. And it was also one game better than what I was able to do with TL back in summer of 2020. And I'd even talked to like Core and Cold about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're going for the 16-2. Like we're trying to get it." So like they weren't over experimenting or anything. They just got beat. And obviously they've had a lot of like the road to get here actually has been kind of wild for both of C9 and TL, which almost makes it more impressive how far ahead they are of the rest of the league, with C9 having these like visa issues at the start of the year, TL having Core JJ in and out of the roster the whole time, a bunch of players getting COVID, like all this stuff, and they're just like head and shoulders above everybody else.
It's really interesting. So there was a stat I saw. I think this is credit someone on either Twitter or Reddit, but basically, so I'll try to phrase it the correct way that it's like literally accurate. So every time Cloud9 started the week with Max Waldo as head coach, they have won every single game. So like the first 3 weeks of practice were with the old coaching roster, right? And they said, hey, we don't like the way LS is coaching, whatever that is, right? That set of practice got them to 4-2. Since that cutoff, and you know, they dropped him on like that Saturday morning, right? And okay, they went 1-1, they lost to CLG in that game, right? Like, hey, stuff went wrong. But then since that cutoff, every practice has been like, you know, people like Fudge saying, yeah, we like how our draft prep went, our meetings went well, and they have been undefeated since that cutoff. So as much as people are memeing on, and I think Ellis is a smart dude, the direction C9 has taken, yet again, like when Blabber and Sneaky Co are getting cut, right? Like, in the long run, every single time it feels like C9 have made the right choice for the org, and after repivoting, they are undefeated. And like, that's really impressive. You talk about the tumultuousness, right? I mean, up until today, Core JJ, you know, in the full lineup for TL was undefeated. And it's like, yeah, it was tumultuous. And the fact that, well, it was still a 4-2 run was better than most teams, right? With LS, you know, leading the practice. And even with Ayla in and whatnot, well, you know, it's like they won lock-in and they still did really well. So, you know, these are, 2 teams who have done a really, really good job of, even with their like, you know, sort of suboptimal setups, we're also still the best teams in the league. And now they have optimal setups, and they're really the best teams in the league. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think I'm actually wondering how we'll talk about the games for sure, but this is just the more interesting thing that came to my mind because kind of all the conversations that I was having before this game had TL as the strongest team. Like Core JJ made the interview comments yesterday about like, oh, either Blabber or Summit will pop off. Is that a playstyle? I don't know. Like, which I think was an amazing flame. But then Summit does pop off and TL loses. And I think that game itself had a lot of like, I don't want to call them unlucky breaks for TL, but there were a lot of fights that very narrowly went the way of C9, like cross map Jinx ults hitting that prompt these big swings in the game. And the first time the teams played, TL won as well. So yeah, to go back to the big question is, it definitely feels like right now in this moment, what are we like 5 hours after C9 has beaten TL pretty handily? It's like, oh yeah, Winsome said in his post-game interview, like, oh yeah, maybe we go MSI. Yet like 10 hours ago, everyone I talked to would say that would be TL. So it was like, is this best of one result Does that give you an evidence enough to say that C9 is the better team?
So this is funny. So I'm putting my Reddit hat on.
Yeah.
This feels like TSM chat right now, where it's like I'm already making excuses for the result. I don't believe this, right? But like I went to the post-match thread and it's a bunch of Cloud9 flares saying like, can everyone finally admit that we're the best team now? Can we stop talking about how TL's the best team in the league?
Yeah.
And it's like, for those fans, like, this is vindication, right? Like, y'all won. And yeah, guess what? Summit's the best top laner in the league. And it's not close anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there was thoughts, right? Because again, TL won last time. Like, there was evidence to suggest that TL was the better team. And now we got the heads up 1v1. Bwipo got counterpicked. It's like, it's Summit, buddy. And what's great is Summit will crush your lane, and he also can play mid game. So he's the full top laner, right? He's the Jace that we all wanted to see every time we see that first pick Jace, where it's like, yeah, I'll crush the lane, but then also convert. Like Summit is the real deal. And it turns out he's gonna keep crushing that hard. Yo, it's Cloud9, and I fully believe it. I will say that their bot lane played a bit better than normal. Like, I'm still not very hot on Berserker and Winsome in lane. I expected Core and Hans to like really crush that, and they didn't get that much done, right? They didn't win nearly as hard as Summit won. And like, if you tell me, hey, which lane's gonna win harder, TL's bot or Cloud9's top? I will still tell you I expect TL's bot to win harder. That said, though, the overall Cloud9 team I think is better. Like, I keep not expecting Fudge to do very well.
And then he keeps doing well.
And he keeps doing well, right? Because like I wasn't that impressed during lock-in. And to be fair, like that was a mixed roster thing going on. That's always going to be kind of strange. And just like, you know, I was really sour on the Aurelia game when they got their first loss of the regular season. And like, okay, you spent your whole first week of LCS scrims playing Ivor, she said in like an interview with Travis. So I was like, you know, are you really there? And it's like, actually, I feel like he's just like consistently doing more than other mids. He's not super flashy, but that's fine. I think he's been like actually really, really consistent for most games. Like the Lucian game wasn't great, sure, right? But like you look at his overall season, and yes, he's on the best team, but like he's part of that. Like in all these games and so many of these games, he's like, oh yeah, also he was 7-1-4 on Orianna this game. That's like frequently true.
Yeah. And I mean, he was a large part of the game-winning pick onto Bwipo in this game, even though he was just doing his job. Right? He was in a position defending a control ward, dumped all his spells over wall, killed Bwipo. That gets a Jinx reset. That gets them 2 kills. That gets them Baron. You know, the game's over. I guess my question, so you answer my question. Yes, you do think Cloud9 is the best team. Yeah. I think right now that is the correct answer, right? And the correct answer, I can even jump ahead. I've been doing a way too early MVP for like every week of the show. I unfortunately didn't do one last week. This also shows why it was a way too early MVP, and none of those did I say Summit's the MVP. Yet, like, right now, if I was making odds on who would win MVP, Summit, it is Summit's to lose. There is, unless he runs it down in multiple games, more than just one, he's winning MVP. Because he's going to be best player on best team in terms of performance, and they win so much through him. And there's, like you said, if you go into the Reddit threads and if you go on Twitter, like right now, it is an avalanche of Cloud9 is the best team. What I feel like I've always done is I try and not get influenced by those avalanches, and invariably will then get called biased or defensive or ignoring facts. But I just want to hedge against the C9 is clearly the best right now.
Right. So actually, and I'll kind of defend this one because I love devil's advocating stuff. And he's like, people don't think this. I'm like, great, I'm here to debate them.
Cool.
So like coming into today, right? What were the odds you would give Cloud9 beating TL? Like you wake up in the morning, said like what's the odds?
I think it was like 40%, which is pretty high.
Right. So you know, even if you still believe TL's the better team or whatever, right? It's like, well, there's a 40% chance where TL's the better team but still loses. Like, yeah, they're favored, maybe they win the best of 5, but like, okay, it's very realistic to just like be in the world where TL's the better team but lost this game. Like, that's not unrealistic, especially if we think TL's only a little bit better. That yes, indeed, it's 60-40. You know, T1 are the best team in the LCK. Guess what? They've dropped like 8-9 games. They're 16-0 in matches.
It's like 5 or 6, isn't it? But it's
I don't remember.
They're
exactly,
definitely not undefeated. Their best of 3 record is undefeated, but they're not undefeated.
Right. So like imagine you stop and you're like, well, you know, here's game 1 against, I don't remember which team they dropped games to, right? But like, well, here's game 1, they lost. Pause. What do you mean T1's not the best, still the best team? What do you mean they lost, right? And it's like, well,
32-6 in their game score.
Yeah. Okay. So 6. Yeah. 6 was the drop, right? So it's like, yeah. And that's just like to say, hey, look, you are not an idiot. You are not ignoring data. You are not ignoring fact. If you're like, Well, I expected there to be results like this. These would be possible. Like, of course, right? So yeah, like I will say it is, of course, defensible to still think TL is the best team. And that's what playoffs are for. Like, I'm kind of glad. Like, I saw some Reddit comments about like, oh, XC best of threes, whatever. But like, well, we're still really confident we're picking the best teams.
Yeah.
And guess what? We're gonna see 2 best of 5s of these teams. We're gonna see in winter bracket finals. Then we'll see them again on the finals, and across 2 BO5s, we'll know pretty confidently which one's the better team. And until then, they're still the top 2 seeds, and we seeded correctly.
Yeah, and is this win more important than the win that happened 3 weeks ago for TL? No, it's not.
It's actually the same result, yeah.
It's exactly the same value. What has more value would be Summit's 6th player of the games in their 11 wins, which is putting them head and shoulders above everyone else in Pogs. Okay, game itself. Interesting game, and I think in terms of Summit's storyline, I think really important as well, because while I do think, and I will stand by the statement of, like, he's by far the best Gnar, and he will play that whenever he can, and if the other team has Gnar, he will play Jace, and he will do that whenever he can. And I will stand by the statement that when he dropped to Gwen, his Gnar and Jace were 10s, and his Gwen was like a 6 or 7. So when he played Tryndamere, because Team Liquid banned Gnar and Jace in the 1-2-3 with their immediate set of bans. And that was, in terms of the Games of Legends thing I looked up, his very first stage game ever on Tryndamere. So to me, that was like, ooh, if this Summit theory is going to hold up in this test, this ain't going to work. And then it worked like tremendously well. So that's the proving the hypothesis wrong in this instance. So that really helps C9's overall stock for me. If Summit is able to do like this may be a bigger conversation. For some reason, I feel like I'm in this mood because I haven't been doing like 3-minute desk segments. So maybe I'm more open to like bigger typical conversations as I've been sitting back watching LCS today. Even if Summit is a player who's like Gnar and Jace, and then he had a drop off for other players, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because he creates matchup difficulties, if I'm going to make a different sports analogy, for the opponent, right? He will always have an advantage with this champion on this side of the map, or he will always grant some advantage in draft by drawing the bans. So it is not a knock on a player to say
how dare you be a world-class Jace, right?
Exactly. How dare you be like actually the best Gnar that I have seen, right? Yet, a lot of times when you say that, it gets taken as an insult of like, oh, he's not the best at absolutely everything. Which I think if you tried to...
He's not the literal best player in the world? Trash.
Exactly. And if you tried to make that statement, I was having this conversation like behind the scenes on the desk yesterday. You try to make that translation to other sports, and like, I don't think that standard necessarily exists. It's just kind of accepted as a fact. Like, oh yeah, this player is way better at these champions than the other champions. Oh yeah, this basketball player is way better at shooting threes than he is at free throws. And there's a lot more data to back it up in basketball, but like that's so clear in a statement. And Dash made the analogy around running where like in long distance running, it's like, okay, do you have a good finish? Do you have a good kick? Are you a good lead runner throughout most of the race? Or do you want to hang in the middle and then kick at the end? Like there's all these different strategies for running, but it's very clear that you were better at one thing than another. Yet in League, I feel like when you try and make those comparisons about super elite players, it's rejected by a large portion of people.
Yeah, which is so strange because that's just default. Like, we're human beings, we like can't be for everything, right? It's not deep mind running around controlling 5 champions, and so like that matters. Those edges matter. Those like, hey, 1 in 10 games, this difference is going to change the result. And it's funny because it dovetails a little bit into a conversation around aggression. I know Vulcan was on an interview and asked about Core JJ, and he's like, Core JJ is considered an aggressive player, and he's like, oh, I just think he's a good player. He just like makes the right choices. And it's like, well, it depends on your point of view, because the perfect player makes all the right aggressive choices and all the right defensive choices. And if you're the perfect player and you're in a metagame, in an environment where everyone's defensive, you're making just good choices means you found aggressive looks that no one else finds. So you just look aggressive when all you are is a better player. And on a sort of different note, you can just be a flawed player where like, look, I'm gonna, over-aggress 2% of the time and like fail to play defensively some percent of the time, and so I do skew aggressive. Like that can also be true, but that's an interesting like part of the conversation around, right? Imperfect players, they're better at some things than others. Like, oh, I'm really good at starting team fights, but I'm not as good at peeling or
Right.
whatever. Like your map can only be in one place at a time, right? Oh, my map awareness is better, but my jungle clear isn't as quick. I don't optimize that as well as I gank effectively, and it's like that's gonna matter sometimes and not in others. And that as a player, you have people have strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. So, do you have any thoughts on the game itself? Now that we spent 50 minutes talking about like C9 and TL and the environment around it, what do you think of the game?
I mean, it was a fun game. I saw a bunch of comments around like how Bippo was hard inting, and he had some bad plays, but like I thought he played the lane very, very close.
Yeah.
I was more impressed by, and I think Flowers or Kobe or Flowers or Azale called it out in the cast, like someone was really, really good at holding his ult to the right time. I noticed Bippo did a really good job of like hit minions twice, QW the champion and get like a 500 damage burst and walk away, and you can never trade that one back. And so someone's like, ooh, when am I allowed to go for the lane? Mm-hmm. But every time these bursts were coming through, he's like, but that's not going to one-shot me. And it would put him to 40 health, and he'd be like, oh, the next auto.
Yeah.
Like every time. Like I don't think he missed an ult by like, he didn't miss an ult, and he never hit it early by more than half a second. And that's that's very, very impressive when like, you literally have 3 spells in the R pass, the W, and functionally a Sheen that you're like, nah, it's not enough.
Yeah, the only mistake I remember him making in the game would have been when he had the big bounty after like the Rift Herald and the dive top lane, and then he immediately tried to roam into the bottom lane for a dive before his ultimate was up, and he just got turned on and bursted and gave out the bounty, and actually like it actually ended up being a very close game. So there was the Rift Herald fight, which was the biggest win for them for C9 in the game, where Berserker doesn't even leave bottom lane on Jinx. Cloud9 just starts the Rift Herald, but doesn't turn cleanly. Like they had the numbers advantage, but it wasn't an immediate numbers advantage since Zeri was coming from mid lane. And that fight in particular, where they lose a bunch of people, they lose place to Berserker, as well as losing the Herald in effectively a 4v5. That is like, to me, that's basically GG for most teams.
Yeah. They jumped from a 300 gold deficit to a 2,000 gold lead to then a 3,000 gold lead on finishing the turret with Herald. Yeah. And it's like, we're in control. We're up, 3K at 14. Like, that's our game. And credit to TL for, like, working it back. By the time we got to 29 minutes, like, they had brought it to equal or had, very, very small leads. And it's like, TL does still have a very, very good mid game. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, then Bwipo overstepped again and died, right? Like, there was one where he fought for the ward in mid lane and just, like, got Victor one comboed and didn't flash out of the W stun.
Mm-hmm.
It's really telegraphed. He was second and a half. No, I'm getting stunned here. Nah, just give it the death, give him Baron, right? Or whatever it was that they got afterwards, that kill. There's one where he was fighting, I think it was the Tryndamere, but it was somebody where, like, Winsome gets onto his screen and he's like, I'm leap striking this. My dodge is down, but, like, you're not going to ult in time from 600 health. And it's like, bro, just take the ulting and get out. Like, you got it, right? So, like, a lot of it he played on the edge really, really well. I actually liked his build. Warden's Mill Rush is good against auto attackers. Mm-hmm. I like Frozen Heart Rush over finishing boots. I defend that Merc Treads are the generically best boots in the game. And so if you can get good armor elsewhere and then just like snag Merc Treads like third item, I think it's actually a very intelligent build because he does have to get out of Chompers and out of Zap and Tom Kench and Victor, right? Like there's a lot of these sources of CC that you do have to shrug that you have literally no other way of buying tenacity for. And you want some MR because Fudge exists. Like you are going to team fight at some point. Mm-hmm. And Steel Caps don't help you against Fudge at all. But like, all right, I've got my Triforce and my Frozen Heart. I'm ready to fight Trend. Like that was intelligent. I stopped for Merc Treads. I go back in a Death Stand. Like I think his build was very, very intelligent. I think Whippo has maybe the single best item builds in the league. I think it's always very well thought out and very intelligent. I do want to give him credit for that one because I think he is the most ingenious player in the league. Summit has way better hands and his mid game is also clean, right? Like he's the best laner and the best, if not like almost the best, if not actually the best in mid game to late game as well. Like he's in the right place at the right time. He's using his leads very, very well. So like Summit feels like a very, very complete player. I think Whippo though is more ingenious.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comparison between the two players, and Whippo even talked about it a lot in the pregame interviews where Whippo, I mean, ingenious, I'd have to like look up the definition. I would say like cerebral player almost.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah, he absolutely is smart. And when you talk to him, like he will, if someone is there to listen, he will talk, right?
Of a person, clever, original, and inventive. I would say he is all three of those.
That's actually a perfect word.
Yeah. He is Iceborne Gauntlet, Demonic Shyvana. That is dumb strong.
It's super good.
Top and jungle, by the way. Whippo played it. Smart man. That stuff is broken, by the way. Smart man.
Yeah, but then also I was reading comments, so I don't know how completely verifiable they are, but someone was saying like, oh yeah, when Yamato was coaching Summit, he's talked about how Summit, like if you were to bring up a new pick to him, he would say, well then why isn't Khan and Nuguri playing it?
Interesting.
Right? So he's just like, he is just going to be the best at the things that are there, rather than Bwipo, who is going to try and find the things that aren't there and make and show that they are actually are the best. And both of those, like for what it's worth, both of those can be very valuable things. I think definitely people that would traditionally listen to like hour-long League of Legends podcasts are going to favor the ingenious player. But
Yeah.
but the grinder who just like wins every lane matchup because he's done it 1,000 times is also an incredibly powerful weapon.
So this is interesting because I don't think I've had a discussion with you on this show, but I'm going to start with a data point and use it to talk about the discussion.
Okay.
So the most biased matchup in League of Legends is Sylas versus Malphite top.
Yeah, it's like 8%
And the
difference.
win rates, it's a 10% difference from what
Okay,
I've seen.
okay.
Either way, it's very high, right? Like, and it is the single most biased matchup in the game. You can move the win rates by 10%, right? A 50-50 becomes a 40-60, right? I'm pretty sure is the way that that's going to work out.
Yeah.
That is absurd, right? That's like really, really, really big. It is the single biggest matchup difference you can make, which means every single counter in the game is less than 10% win rate difference, right? Like if you take this to like generally speaking work throughout the entire game on average, every single counter pick is less than 10% win rate difference, okay? Mm-hmm. A lot of champions gain more than 10% win rate of like power by you learning them well, right? That like the growth curve of an Akali, the growth curve of a Gwen, the growth curve of Viego is more than 10%. So some champions like Varus are like free and you can first time them whenever and it's not going to change much. Just like channel your Q, don't miss skill shots, whatever. He's a really obvious champion. But like, you know, if you haven't played Shyvana in 6 years, what are you leaving on the table by like having not practiced the pick? Now I'm not suggesting what's happening with Bwipo, right? But like, there's a long tail with a lot of these champions as well, where like even beyond 30 games, you can still go and go and go and go. And so like, well, you might get a 4% matchup edge by counterpicking Summit, but Summit got a 4% matchup edge by putting 50 more games in the champion. Mm-hmm. Summit's still favored, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Unless you put those games in as well, and it's like both those things are true, right? Like both those factors are real factors. You have to compete. They're competing.
They're competing
right?
factors.
So how many games the counterpicks can you put in? And this is like a very small reason why we don't see more heavy counters, because nothing's Malphite Sylas. Mm-hmm. Everything's short of that. Mm-hmm. So how much are you getting on a champion you've played 3 times?
Mm-hmm. And the familiarity factor. And it scales infinitely, but with diminishing returns in terms of games played. So like the 0 to 50 is the biggest growth, 50 to 100 is smaller. And then where these guys are, like a guy like Summit, he's probably at like 3,000 on Gnar. But he's just so ridiculously masterful of the champion. Final thoughts on TLC9. At this moment, who will win the split? I think it's a 10% chance it's neither. Maybe less. Maybe less. But like 90% is pretty high. And then I would say I am not going to overreact off of this game, but I'm still going to react off of this game. So if it's 10% chance other, I'll go 50% TL, 40% C9. That's my current odds. What are you at?
I mean, that is higher than, if you extrapolate, that is higher than 60-40. Or sorry, that is less extreme than 60-40, right? Because you're a little more, you're like 58-42. So you have shrunk in a bit, you know? Right? You got one game of data and you shrunk it in, which is, I think, the appropriate way to do that, right? Yeah. I had come in like, oh, I'm so sure, like, with Core, this team is better. They won last time, and with Core, it's going to be an improvement. And the fact that I didn't see that, and the fact that I'm seeing more and more of Bjergsen and Fudge, and I'm like correcting my calibration on those players.
And the Fudge arc is increasing, it seems, week over week.
Right, the Fudge arc is increasing to me, right? Where, like, again, I wasn't really impressed at the start, but much like with Summer Split, where by the middle of, or, you know, way back when, right? By the middle of spring, I was like, oh, Fudge is actually just elite. I don't think Fudge is the second best mid laner in the league right now. But he is definitely top half. His goal is to be top 3 or the best by playoffs. At this point, I actually believe it. That I think of like, who are the other elite mid laners in the league? And I'm like, actually, yeah, I could see Fudge being a playoff MVP. I mean, okay, someone's on his team, but like, I think I now believe it's actually realistic that Fudge could just be the best mid laner through playoffs. And I didn't really think that before, but yeah, the trajectory is really fast. And do I take him over Pearson right now? I'm still not sure, but it's much closer than I had thought it was initially.
Right. Do you got percentages or no?
I will go like 53-47 C9. I'm like, I slightly favor Cloud9. I still want to see more, right? Because again, it is only one game, and like it was Whippo bringing us first time Jax, like, and I still expect the bot lane to win because I've seen so many games with Core and Hans versus Winston. I expect more out of the bot lane next time around in the BO5. So like I think the game will not look the same. But you know, at the end of the day, I was close, and some of my expectations were tempered. And yeah, I'll just say I slightly favor Cloud9.
Nice. Okay. C9 TL. That's the LCS this year. But the first question I asked you actually when I called you before we hit record, since we just watched it, and multiple teams went 2-0 this week. 100 Thieves went 2-0, C9 went 2-0, and CLG went 2-0. So here's the question. Is CLG actually good? Because we've been saying that they've been bad, and they have been bad for a while. What were they? Like 1-6? 1-7?
Something like that.
At a certain point?
They're 4-1 over the last 5, I think. Or maybe they're 5-1 over the last 6.
Yeah, but they're on a big win streak. It was obviously a 2-0. It was a 1-1 last week, and I believe it was like a 1-1 the week before that.
Yeah, they 2-0'd in 2014. Or sorry, in 12.4.
Yeah.
They probably did 2-0 in 2014, to be fair. But they 0-2'd. Yeah, I'm sure that happened. But yeah, they 0-2'd last week, so that kind of puts the streak into it. So yeah, they lost opening game Super Week, and then 2-0'd, which is TSM and EG, impressive win. Then they went back to a dumpster, and they lost to 100 Thieves and Dignitas, who are like pretty good teams, right? They're above them in the standings. And then this week, they go back to a 2-0. So if you cut off that first game of Super Week with the last two Immortals, they are 4-2. In exactly that cutoff. If you include Super Week, it's 4-3, which is less impressive looking, of course. But like, you know, in this round robin, if you want to cut off this way, they're 2-2, right? They had a 3-6 first round robin. They're 2-2 since then. But if you want to slice it favorably, okay, 4-2 over 6, like whatever you want to do. You know, the teams that gotten out of the way are Dignitas, 100 Thieves, FlyQuest, and Golden Guardians. So they have fought a lot of middle of the pack teams.
Yep.
They haven't fought TSM. They haven't fought Immortals, so they have 2 easy ones. They also haven't fought in Cloud9 or TL, right? So they're probably going 2-2 from those. And then it's like, well, you've got difficult ones ahead of that one, right? For your last few, right? You've got one game beyond that, right? TLC9 next week, Immortals, TSM, and then your last game is EG. And that's probably the last game of the split is for playoffs at that point, right? It's like, well, if I beat EG again, I'm 2-0 in the head-to-head, and your spot is mine.
That would be something.
If it plays out expectation, right?
Yeah. I think they're... So I've been doing this game on the analyst desk where I've been calling teams not the worst. And by process of elimination, I'm going to lose the game pretty soon. Because I said, start of the year, I said Immortals not the worst. Then I actually thought TSM not the worst. Because like I thought there was more in the tank. I think at this point, TSM is the worst. We were talking about it a little bit before the show. It's kind of a go next split angle. We don't think they're going to make huge roster changes. They have 2 more weeks, but big roster changes for summer split. And we can just like, we'll put that to bed. We'll talk about that later. COG in particular, preseason, I thought like, oh, Luger's really good. This team needs to find ways to work around him, and he'll be able to bring them a lot of victory. And I was thinking that with the Unleash teleport changes, that bottom lane supremacy was going to be more valuable and lead to more wins. So originally I put them a little bit high. And then we went through the first half of the split, and to me, Contracts are just running it down. That's an over-exaggeration, but he was playing as the worst jungler who was starting in the league.
Yeah. Totally.
And that had so many knock-on effects on the rest of the team and also on like Luger's carry potential because they weren't able to intelligently play around bottom lane the way that a team like 100 Thieves would have last year. Because bot lane, as much as you can be good 2v2, is like almost never a 2v2 kingdom. It's a 2v2 edge, which can then be taken advantage of by having favorable 3v3s and 4v4s or 3v2 dives or 4v2 dives. It's a whole team effort to get an 80 carry ahead in a lot of cases. But with the 2 Kaisa games today, and also with Contracts, I think, playing well, especially in his Rek'Sai game today, they look like a serviceable team. Like, this is the team that I thought I was going to see at the start of the year, which I would not call the worst team in the league. There was a moment where I was going to call them the worst team in the league, but they are not that.
Yeah, my dive prediction, I think, from the very beginning was I had CLG, and I want to say it was Immortals. I don't remember exactly, but like before we even saw lock-in, like those are the rosters that I said, okay, I like the talent on this team. I think these are good players. Like I think these are two that get over the line outside of the obvious four that everyone was nodding from the very, very start, right? There's an obvious top four, and I think these are the two who are going to make it. Yeah, CLG are turning into that team now. Again, they are one behind playoffs. The expected results from here is 3-2. We'll see if they get, because unless you're getting a C9 or a TL upset, your best run is 3-2. So you hope EG they go 2-2 without you, right? And you beat EG. Like that is the actual need, or they can't make it, basically, right? If EG steps above that, or and then Flag was Dig are another game ahead of that one. So like 2-3 is good enough to like keep you off at that point as well. Pivoting to Immortals is not the worst. Look at their schedule. They are getting depressed slightly by schedule. They've gotten through all of the top teams already, basically. Like Immortals remaining 5 is 100 Thieves. Okay, that one's kind of tough.
Yeah.
TSM, CLG, FlyQuest, Golden Guardians. Like if Immortals say they're a playoff caliber team, that is a 5-0 possible run. Now it's not easy, but obviously 100 Thieves are looking pretty good. But like I think bare minimum for playoffs is 7. Like mathematically, it's at least 7. I think is the requirement. So Immortals like literally must at least 3-2, and more likely 4-1, which means that you can drop 100 Thieves and nothing else. But that's actually doable if they clean up the games. Like I don't think they're complete garbage. Obviously, they are at 4-9, but they're 4-9 by having to already fight TL and C9.
This actually made me think we're gonna have, if we're projecting towards playoffs, we're gonna have so many wins taken out of the standings by TL and C9 if they continue to go on runs. And the last time we had two teams that were like super, super dominant would have actually been 2016 summer. So I'm just looking this up right now. And obviously there were best of threes, but there were still 18 round robins.
Right. It's still 18 matches. So.
Yeah. So it was a 17-1 TSM and a 16-2 Immortals. But what that ended up doing is there was a tie for 6th at 8 and 10. So 8 and 10 made playoffs that year. I think this is definitely a year where we can see an 8 and 10 make playoffs. So I think that should be the target for a lot of these teams that are trying to sneak into six seed. At least you're going to get a tiebreaker, I think, if you're at 8 and you're not an 0-2 against the team you're tied with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The bare minimum number is 7, and that's like if everything goes perfectly mathematically so that you can like squeak in and do a tiebreaker there. But yeah, 8 seems very likely. I agree with that one, which means, by the way, like Dignitas is one off, FlyQuest is one off, 100 Thieves are already there, TL's a shoe-in, of course, and EG only 2 away, and we'll see with them. Which surprised me a little bit. I guess we can pivot to talking about 100 Thieves though.
Yeah.
Speaking of 2-0 teams. 2-0 team. Yeah, guess what? They're alone in 3rd behind Cloud9 and TL. Yeah, wow. We're so surprised now,
They played. I mean, they had the one. They had a choosy one in game 1 of the week.
I know.
Where they were down like 11,000 gold, and then clutched it out with FBI hitting a max item jinx and Scion finally being relevant. And then today they were actually against the Scion and made him pretty irrelevant because they were just able to snowball ahead. Yeah, they continue to be a disappointment because they are the defending champions, but I will still not count this team out. So like they're the majority of at this point, they're the majority of that 10% of like anyone else of who's realistically has a chance to win the split. I think 100 Thieves still has a small chance of winning the split.
8%
if they,
or something like that.
If they pull it together and this is going to be an oversimplification, and Mark and I were memeing about this on the desk, but I had the first dragon stat pulled at the start of the week. Did you see this?
Yeah. And it was, they win if they get first dragon. They're like 50% if they don't.
It was like way lower because they were 3-0 if they get the first dragon, and then it was like 40% win rate or 30% win rate if they don't. Of course, like the league average for first dragon is a 74% win rate. So they actually win more than other teams when they don't get first dragon. So it's more of a correlative
interesting, because it's 30% to not get it, but they're 35%.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they're a good team, so yeah.
But they're still a good team. But like that is to me an indicator of what type of control they have in the game. And if they have control over bot lane, then they are more likely to get dragon. But then also where they have been weak is in closing games. And if they're not putting on Dragon Soul pressure, they're not getting, like, then they have to force engages. But if they're doing a Dragon Soul, the engage comes to them, and then it's just about finding the angle because the other team is drawn to the important thing on the map. And today in particular was the first game in a while I've seen them actually stack dragons pretty quickly. And then sure enough, like on the Soul Fight, they get like a massive win and the game is just over. And that's to me how they won in 2021. So it looked to me like they were getting a little bit more back to that, especially with the Scion pick, even though that game is not a good example of what they should or want to look like. But I think their window into winning the split is just the same it's always been. It's just try and control bot lane, stack dragons, and then win team fights.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad too because Someday has looked really good on the carries. Coming into when I was casting him last week, he was 2-0 and like a 21 KD and Tryndamere. And then he lost the game I cast with him on Tryndamere and looked really good, but the team couldn't convert. And I think he had one more game where he looked good on Tryndamere and the team couldn't convert. And it's like, well, now they're 50-50 on Tryndamere with the team with the winning record. They're in third place, right? They're actually winning a lot of games. And even though Someday is a good Tryndamere, at least through the early mid game, I think his team fights are actually fine. Like, I don't think he's the reason they're losing by any means. But the team doesn't seem to know how to do anything, or at least to do the right things, if some days the Goldien and someone else isn't. Like, it seems like, imperfect players, imperfect team, right? Like, they don't have everything. And even though some days very, very good, the team overall is not equipped to navigate top diff. They're only equipped to navigate bot diff. It's what it feels like.
I agree with you, but I bet you either you or me or another analyst said exactly the same thing with like 2017 Someday on Dignitas. It has literally been the same conversation almost any time he like plays cares. They're like, wow, like he gets this big advantage, but for some reason it just doesn't come together. So I actually agree with the analysis. I think it's completely correct. It's why I think like when Someday wins championships, he's actually on a more supportive role. Even back in the Dignitas days when he was playing stuff like Maokai, I'm like, that's actually how they win. Again, a bit of an oversimplification, but that's definitely where I see his sweet spot in participation in the scene is. You can still put him on a counter matchup, right? Like Aatrox, for instance, into Scion. But that's a less team reliant counter matchup. It's I will get ahead and create pressure on my own.
Fighter.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Whereas Tryndamere, it's kind of about him. It's more about him than it is about an Aatrox.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that one lines up, right? Gwen's kind of the similar boat here. Jace is similar boat where like he had a big like you just like compare and I remember this has happened. I mean, for so many years, right? Like I've seen a lot of top laners come in, and I don't know if they're not good at calling what they need in the mid game, or if the teams aren't equipped to play around a winning top. But like I've seen a lot of games throughout the years of hotshot top laner comes in, looks really good, wins lanes, and the team has no idea how to use that lead. Whether the player is bad at playing mid game, which happens sometimes. Or the team doesn't know how to shot call a winning top lane, or they're not good at calling for the resources to set up the team, or whatever it is, right? But it's usually like a high-profile import top laner. And then, like, we had Huni, who was really far ahead against Gwen when TSM played on Saturday. He's up 40 CS, he's up a tower, he's up 2 kills, and I couldn't tell Graves was ahead because something happened with it. We had Sunday's Jace in week 5 where he was up really far ahead. It was about as up as Summit was, like earlier in that week, basically. And Hunter Thieves lost because nothing happened with his lead, right? He was just kind of up there, like pushing a wave and like, I'll join the team, I guess. And you compare that to Summit, where it's like, oh, Summit's ahead on top lane and the game got broken open, right? Like when you see players like Summit, we're like, the first 50 minutes are the same. The first 15 minutes is, okay, I'm up first tower and I'm up 600 gold and like, I'm the guy. And Summit wins the game, and like Huni and Seraph and Someday and Keep and Revenge, they don't. And that like that gap is why so many teams are bot focused.
Yeah. Well, I'll also say one more thing. Like, yes, Summit is doing this now, but like in the history of League, how many teams won Worlds with top gap, top focus, compared to the amount of teams that won with either a dominant bot lane or a dominant mid lane, right? I actually do. There is truth in what you're saying, but I was thinking about this earlier in terms of like simplifying things. Top lane is the easiest lane to get ahead, and it is the hardest lane to win the game through.
Probably true. I mean, yeah, if you're saying a lane overall, I mean, certainly mid laners have more golden XP, and a bot lane is 2 champions. So it's just like mathematically, has to be kind of true. But that's interesting, right? Because like it probably does prove out. And again, there's a reason it goes this way. And I mean, I think of the Cloud9 Fnatic IG worlds where it's like Bwipo hard top gapped Licorice, and Fnatic won that 3-0 basically through top lane. Like Liquor shouldn't do anything, and Bwipo just converted every single time. And then like the Shy did the same thing, and he even talked about it in his interview. Bwipo was talking about him versus someone. He's like, then sometimes you fight the Shy, and it's like, oh, you can just do that.
I also think Caps gapped Jensen in the C9 series, and
that's probably true.
Rookie
as well.
was pocking off on Caps, and like that was the solo lane worlds. But yes, like both can be true. And it's not that you can't win through top lane, but if I actually stack rank the lanes, top lane, easiest to get ahead, hardest to close the game with. Mid lane, I think, is the middle of the two. And this is different because there was that whole year where people were like mid-prio is the dominant thing in League of Legends. And the theory for that is because the waves crash 10 seconds earlier than the side waves. So if you get control of mid, you can move it out and control the whole map. But bot lane is harder to get ahead because when you send resources down there, your number advantage is like less percentage. Top lane, it's simple.
3v2 is tough. Yeah,
exactly. 2v1 is easy. 3v2 is harder. But bot lane just has more people, which to me will make it more valuable than the 10-second difference on the mid waves. This is like game theory. It changes with champions. It changes with patches, but like more of a general thing. So I think that's actually the reason that you play through bot lane because like it is harder to get ahead, but the rewards are so much bigger. Like you can actually more reliably win games if you're successfully able to play through bot than if you're able to play through top.
Yeah, I also think you can. I don't know if you can more exacerbate skill differences, but like it's weird because I devolve it into a math problem again where like okay if I'm gonna spend and I'm gonna pick it really arbitrary 800 resource units at pushing up bot lane, right? And trying to win bot lane through draft, through whatever, through trying to gank, through trying to path. Like, how many of those games turn to a bot lead? Is it 60%? Is it 70%? Okay, if I'm ahead, my win rate's 80%, but I only got it, 2/3 of the time.
Yeah.
If I spend resources getting top ahead,
lane.
I get it 90% of the time. My win rate is not 80, but 60%, right?
Like it depends on the percentages.
Problem when it's right. And again, it doesn't have to be a math problem. And we are in a world where like top lane doesn't TP to bot, right? It's Tryndamere and Jackson stuff. Like again, we have Jace out there who's actually able to play more isolated and whatnot. It does feel like somewhat of a shift because C9 tend to be like behind in bot, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does really depend. And to your point about historics, like that is true. I think back to when Huni went to the World Finals on SKT, and like Ruler like won the game, and indeed it was like Gen G, then Samsung Galaxy won through bot. But I remember Huni throughout that Worlds was like, I'm off on an island split pushing like top lane tier 2, and like even in world quarters, no one's stopping him. He's going to semis, no one's stopping him. And it's like he got SKT to a finals where like really only he and Faker were playing well. And like you don't remember that like no one really cares about the finals much as well. It was Samsung Galaxy who won, but like
he was ahead in those games.
He was crushing Cuvée in those games. It's like, well, they made the world final off of, again, top gap and mid gap, right? Like Faker was obviously part of that one. But like, like that was still part of it, right? And you think back to the KT IG best of 5, they probably only get there because of the Shy, right? Like, they only, that's out in quarters against KT if it's not the Shy, right?
Yeah, and also one thing I'll add to this, to maybe contradict my own point a little bit, is meta dependency matters a lot in this. If the top lane champions can actually just carry the game, or if they're just so broken that they one-shot 80 carries. Like if we're in a Camille Fiora meta, right, then actually top control and Rift Herald might be, for that moment, more important than getting your Jhin ahead bottom lane.
Do you know off the top of your head, first Herald win rate difference versus first Dragon win rate difference? Do you have that right away or no?
No, but we'll get it.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Because for the most part, Herald is off of who's winning top mid, and Dragon's off who's winning bot.
No. Herald can be off a bot a lot of the time.
I know it can be because people like roam out, but like a decent portion of Heralds, and you're right, like it does have some like a decent amount, but like there have been a decent amount of like it's just 4v, it's only 1v1 bot lane before top, and like you usually don't have like, oh, I've got a Fed support, so we're doing it. But you're right, it is pretty team focused.
Yeah, I think, and again, this is just like anecdotal. And I was also on a team that had like a bot lane focused shot caller, and when we had Alfari, like an insanely lane dominant top laner. So it's like we kind of had both. But like if you have like Renekton, you kind of just get Herald because his ultimate is so dominating when he's level 7 and you're in that fight. But if you don't have a mismatched top lane, I think it's bot that makes the difference.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
I mean, I guess it has to be, right? Because if top's not the difference, where's the difference? Well, the lane roaming up.
I guess that's true. But
Like if
anyone
top is a wash, then okay.
Yeah, any lane can give you Herald advantage. I don't think it's actually that disproportionate,
Okay.
even though it's on
Okay.
the top
Okay.
side of the map.
Okay.
I baited people into
Support does roam up, so yeah.
I baited people into a much different episode of JLXP. We haven't gotten into everyone. I have this
on the doc. We talked about the teams. We talked about Cloud9. We talked about CLG. We talked about 100 Thieves.
Yeah. We got to talk about Golden Guardians though.
Okay.
Because the last time you were on, we actually asked the question, could Golden Guardians win the split? We were that up on them because they were they've been doing so well. But now they're not. They've lost a bunch of games.
Nope.
They're on a, I believe, 4-game losing streak. They went 5-4 in the first round robin. Now they are 5-8.
Yep. 0-4 is a super week, and that was a week where they beat TL.
And you wonder how much of this how much of this comes down to the variance of best of ones, because we just talked up 100 Thieves for like being able to play through bottom lane and clutch out team fights. We had some great, like on the broadcast, if you saw them, we had some great interviews between Anero and Closer talking about like the Golden Guardians and 100 Thieves thing, because like the core of that team actually came from Golden Guardians. So these organizations kind of have not beef, but like an intertwined history for sure. And if Golden Guardians won that game against 100 Thieves at the time, their records would have been identical. That's how close these teams were. 10,000 gold up 30 minutes into a game at the start, but now Golden Guardians lost. They're on this 4-game losing streak. So now we're asking the question of what is wrong with Golden Guardians, and do we need to stop making excuses for them in terms of their inability to close games? Is it variance or is it a big problem?
It's definitely a problem. I mean, certainly variance is part of everything, and you know, we knew Golden Guardians high variance. I mean, they are one of exactly 2 teams, I guess 3 teams now, to beat Team Liquid. Like, you know, their top end is high, right?
Yeah.
Like they clearly have the skill to win against very good teams, but yeah, they're, you know, my sort of mean skill level drops with every loss, right? I get a little bit more data where it's like, okay, this wasn't like, well, it was week 1 of the LCS, you went 0-2, but like one of it was against Smite Top and you probably should have won it or whatever. It's like, you know, you really could have gotten there, I, you know, believe. And it's like, well, we're in week 6 of the LCS and you still have the same problems. Okay, well, guess what, right? You know, now I'm pretty confident you're not getting the rest of the way there. Now they still may make playoffs. You know, they're again being at 5-8, 3-2 is doable. Look at their schedule. Let's see, they've got FlyQuest, Dignitas, Team Liquid rematch, EG, Immortals. There's only one team where I'm like, I favor you in that game. Like what I've seen most recently is like, wow, you really can't get it together, right? They lost to CLG and TSM. That's like, yeah. I don't believe in you anymore.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Ole has been able to find a lot of good engages, right? Licorice continues to have some strong laning phases. Pride Stalker continues to be able to build early advantages through efficiently farming the jungle. But like you said, it's too many things to ignore of them not getting it together. And either it's like, I think if I had to be nitpicky and go with the gut check here, like a Blaze Olive gets picked a lot too much. And Ole is a little like late game too flippy with his engages. Those would be 2 of the bigger things that are leading to them not being able to close games. Because I think generally like their map play, like how they assign lanes, how they try and push waves, like it's pretty sound, but they're making these split-second decisions with Ole, and a little bit like of a loss of focus with Blaze Olive in the mid game that's hurting them.
Yeah, this feels like somewhat the Anero coaching style. I remember he talked about it when he was on the analyst desk after the Cloud9 game, I think it was, where he's like, yeah, you know, we didn't want to just say, oh, just roll over at Summit, go ahead and die. Like, I'm glad Licorice took his shot. Yeah. And it seems like, so for example, the other stat that I have is a Blaze Olive leads mid laners in solo kills. He is number 1 in solo kills. So this whole team is like, yeah, if you see a shot, go for it, right? And the entire like backdrop is take your shot, make the play, go be aggressive, play on your terms. What's funny about that, though, is for the first 20 minutes, that tends to work out. Like a Blaze Olive got first blooded by, you know, both the mid laner and jungler flashing at him in sequential ganks and eventually killing him. Okay, fair point. And then he was still equal in farm, and like kept trading 1-for-1 with like I think literally every death except the first one. And so it's like, yeah, these players play really, really well. And then the ironic thing is we get past 20 minutes and the like, oh, we're really aggressive, we're gonna go, we're the team. They can never find the fight. Like we're up 8K and somehow we can't fight them.
Yeah.
We can't fight them with 8,000 gold lead to win the game. Why? You have a Nautilus. Why? And you just go, game by game on this one, but like they're not finding it in the end, even though they're so skewed towards aggression. And on average, it works in the early to mid game.
Mm-hmm. Let's project forward for them. They have. Oh no, I've lost the tab.
Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. They continue to play in the next 5 games.
Fly Dig, I take 0-2.
Yep.
TLEG Immortals, like I would say on paper is 1 and 2.
Fly Dig is definitely both winnable, right? Like
of course they are.
2 weeks ago we'd say, oh, Fly Dig, right? So I think both those are winnable. TL, they actually won it, but I'd say that's the least winnable from a percentage standpoint. Then EG, IMT. So they're not out of playoffs by any means. Like right now, they're 1 game back of Evil Geniuses, who's at 6 and 7, 2 games back of FlyQuest and Dig. And FlyQuest at one time was 5 and 1, and now they're 7 and 6. So they're 2 and 5 in their last 7. So yeah, even though they're on a 4-game losing streak, I'd say ball's still somewhat in their court. Especially if we think 8 and 10 is going to be able to make playoffs. But yeah, that's my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's this is what I talked about, right? Which is like I just don't believe in them anymore because you drop the 2 easiest games of the schedule and maybe you think CLG's better. Okay, whatever. But yeah, the only the last game that Golden Guardians basically won was Immortals, right? Like, other than that, it's been 5 losses. And so I just I know your ceiling is very high, but you keep failing to convert, so I'm going to believe less and less and less. I can't get hurt again, I don't want to keep having faith in this team where it's like, okay, it looks so promising, I'll forgive the mistakes, I think he'll get better, and I just don't actually see improvement in finishing out mid games. It's not like, oh my gosh, it was a really sick Baron steal. There was the one where there was a Lee Sin queue and I think Closer or something stole a dragon to get soul or something, right? Mm-hmm. Like there was that one, and actually, that game looks a bit different. But if that was the only one that happened, then that was a really fluke accident. But when you're 4 or 5 of these games in where nope, they really just can't close out games. Like, all right, they just really can't close out games. Like, it's enough data where I'm like, we're defeated the null hypothesis. You just can't close out games. And so they'll have 2 more games where they're up 3,000 at 12 minutes. They'll crash the Herald. They'll get Licorice first tower, and they'll sit there and they'll lose Baron. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because that's what they've shown me. Like, right. Yeah. The players are clearly very good. They're going to keep winning early and mid game. And then, from what I've been shown, they're going to keep losing late games. Yeah. And I would love for that to get fixed up, right?
So they're out of the playoffs. They're out of the playoffs for you.
I mean, yeah, right? Now, if they show up next week and it's like, roll over FlyQuest, roll over Dignitas, and it's like, all right, we're back at 7, and we're back with those 2 teams, hell yeah. I'm like, great, okay. But, I haven't seen that, right? You have to show me that for me to believe it. And so from what I've been shown that they're not capable of doing this.
Yeah. What's fun is, based on the schedule you and I have made, you'll be back after week 8 when we know all of our playoff teams. Your predictions have been pretty good on this show. Like the predictions you've made on the spot in JLXP. Like when you said TSM 3 and 13 back after week 2, that's a good one. They're 2 and 11. They're right on track for 3 and 13. So do you have a record prediction for Golden Guardians then?
The other thing I'll say is I'm pretty sure I was coin flip on Summit versus Berserker. So when you brought me on for week 2, I was at Summit or Berserker, but I'm still on the Whipple train as well.
Oh, for way too early MVP.
For the way too early MVP. So at least I got to give half a point to Summit on that one. So I get to claim that as well. I did have, I think CLG Immortals was the train I was riding for a while. So I'm running maybe one of those trains. My overall prediction, I think Golden Guardians finds their second win. I think it's a 7 and 11 run. Unlike the 11 and 7 that Inero said he wanted. It's a bit backwards day here. That's almost certainly missing playoffs unless EG completely crashes and burns, and it kind of has to be EG crashing. Otherwise, the bar for 6 just rises to 8, basically. So yeah, it's you probably win one of those games. I take you as no chance against TL. You probably go 50-50 against the other 4 teams. You're favored against Immortals, then you're going to win one of the other 3. Right?
By the stats, you have them as oh yeah, because they're so even with so many teams. And also because they're trending towards losing.
Yeah.
It's like 2 wins is a safe bet.
Right. And I'm not confident in any of those other 4 games, right? Like, I am not surprised by any results except them beating Team Liquid.
Yeah.
Any other permutation, 0-5, 4-1, all those like, oh, I can see it. I just think that their resting, power level is below those. I'm also actually very curious if the resting power level is actually below Immortals, because Immortals got screwed on a hard schedule, and even though it's looked really bad, they've lost a lot of games in a row. They're actually also 0-4 in a row. They were in the same track record. It's EG, TL, Dignitas, C9. Like, yeah, okay, you're not number 4,
Super
but like
Week,
you could be number 5 with that practically.
Super Week is the same for the
Same
teams.
3, yeah.
Teams playing teams for everyone. So if a team had like an easy Super Week back in week 4, and remember talking about that, it's going to happen again. So Golden Guardians had a good Super Week possible, right? FlyQuest had an incredibly hard Super Week. Dignitas had like the impossible Super Week where they go TL, C9, 100 Thieves. So it's going to be a really interesting last 2 weeks and finish to LCS. And for Golden Guardians, this is counter to my character, but I think these things have a way of working themselves out. So what I mean by that is if they have a bunch of 50-50-ish games, and all their opponents except for TL are like, oh yeah, I can see them beating them. I think they've had enough of those, oh, I can see them winning that, miss, that like just innately, I think they're going to get 75% of those coming home.
Okay.
Just like a karmic universe thing, right?
Karmic universe, yeah.
I literally noticed this, and this is probably a superstition in like golf, because I've been golfing a ton. If I start the round missing like short 4-foot putts, almost without fail, I will make some freaking long ones later. Right? Okay. Just to like, oh man, I'm 2 putts from 6 feet, and then like from 20 feet, I make it. I'm like, well, putting balances itself out. Like it just does. League best of 1 in League, I think, is sometimes the same way. I think 18 is actually a little bit too low for these things to work themselves out. Like in an NBA season, it's going to work itself out because they play 82 games. They play 4 times as many games as us in arguably a less variant single game format. So it's almost like they're playing, 8 times the amount of volume of what we're doing in League. And if someone starts an NBA season like 10-10, they're not like, just wasn't their year, man. Like, no, right. They just started 10-10. Like they have 62 more games. So I think regardless, Golden Guardians can take the long view on this, and I think that's how they're built from the inside. So, but I'm gonna say they go 8-10.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're not carrying records over. It was a nice experiment from last year. I think it was, ultimately, it came out as a stink bomb. So I'm glad
it ended up like de-hyping the summer split pretty substantially.
Yeah, and that's fine. I don't mind you tried it once. I think the right teams went to Worlds, no complaints, right? At the end of the day, whatever. I'm happy the league tries stuff out. And Golden Guardians, like, okay, you're not gonna win spring anyway. Your odds were already very low. You're definitely doing it now. Okay, as long as you're like good for summer, cool. We'll see you in the run for Worlds when you're going to try again. There's no championship points. Your record from spring, we get to wipe it away. If 100 Thieves keeps just kind of being kind of middling, a surge in Golden Guardians, I can see becomes the 3rd best team by summer. Is it likely? No, but is it unrealistic? Not entirely. And yeah, they can win some of these. I agree to your point that 18 games, especially best of 1, is not going to guarantee you pick the exact 6 best teams.
Yeah.
And hey, but what it is going to do, because I will defend best 1 regular season for a lot because it does the right things, which is I'm left wanting more of Cloud9 TL. I can't wait for playoffs. We're also going to pick the best teams. Like there is 0 chance that like an MS hopeful is like missing playoffs, right? Correct. It's not like, damn, CLG, we're going to go to MSI this year. I can't believe they missed playoffs. That's not, right, realistic. Yeah. Now, CLG, EG, Golden Guardians, they could have made playoffs, but they would then lose first round of 100 Thieves and no one would have missed them, right? Like, does anyone care that, like how those roads went? That, like, Dig snuck in that one time and got 3-0'd? Like, does anyone care? Not really. Yeah. And then for Summer Split, you actually grab 8 teams because you are going to qualify 3 of them. And there's a lower bracket and all that. And it's like, okay, we'll like... Yeah, if TSM ends as 1 and 2 and 16, and it's like the imaginary summer split, does anyone care they missed playoffs? You clearly weren't good enough, right? And then you can hem and haw around Immortals and Golden Guardians at 5 and whatever, but like, at the end of the day, the league is always grabbing enough teams that no one who deserves it's being left out. Like, no one who has a real shot at taking whatever is needed, which is winning spring or top 3 in summer, is being left out. So like, I don't think there's ever a like accuracy problem in the regular season.
I agree with you. In terms of the purpose of qualification for Worlds, but in terms of getting an accurate reading on a team's power level, it would be insufficient. That
You're
would
left
be
watching more, but that's
not
fine.
the point, right? The point is to have
playoffs what matters.
Yeah, and regular season to be exciting.
Right? That's what everyone says. Like, regular season is fun. You get exciting games. They're flippy. You know, if you get a really rough one, like, hey, Immortals TSM, not generally exciting game on paper. It's only one game. Stay tuned for, CLG TL right after, right? And that's like, are they still good?
Man, you and me were in a mood for tangents today.
It's fun.
It was fun. I had a good time. My original goal for this show was like short, digestible, like 20 to 40 minute.
With a dive with 2 people.
Yeah, but we just did it. We just knocked out an hour, and we didn't even talk about all 10 teams. I think that's it. But do you have anything else you want to bring up? Here's your chance.
I feel like I've actually believed in every single team this split. And called them, I think this team can make playoffs. I believe every single team. Casting TSM last week, I said it. Immortals on this show, twice I've said it. Golden Guardians last week, I said it. Or last time I was on CLG, I said it from the actually very start. And then obviously like EG 100 Thieves are supposed to be the shoe-ins. And then, from records, right? I'm sure I've said that I believe that they can fly. So like, I've done a lot of throwing darts. I'm glad you gave me the benefit of the doubt and be like, Phreak, you called that when your prediction's been pretty good. I've done a lot of dart throwing this split because it has been so competitive, right?
Yeah.
Like 4th to 9th is 4 to 7 wins. 4th to 9th is 3 games apart with 5 to play. Like, that's going to go either way, right? We can still see it a lot change around. So like, it has been a tough season to call.
And it was difficult doing power rankings, especially with TSM, for instance. They're 2 and bad. They're 2 and 11 right now.
Yeah.
With 5 games to go. So like, it's possible that they could end the split with 2 wins and be 2 and 16. Yeah, it is. Right? And you compare that to some of the worst teams ever in LCS. So like Coast did the 1 and 17. And then in best of 3, I think Echo Fox did 1 and 17. And in year 1, split 2, Velocity was 3 and 25 or something, right? So we've had some bad teams. But record-wise, TSM has a chance to be that bad. But I just don't think they're as bad as those teams. In terms of think about who was on those Coast teams or Echo Fox teams, but this...
Those teams look hella hopeless.
But this TSM team, 6 months ago, they had the MVP. They have Huni, who's been to a world final and has been a good NA top laner for 5 years. There's just... Yes, they are bad. I'm not saying that they are good.
Oh, yeah.
But
they deserve the record.
And if they get the record, that's bad. But it's just the worst teams in the league are able to punch well above their weight a lot of the time. So if you're not facing C9 or TL, I can almost see anyone beating anyone else. I'm not going to predict it, but I really feel like that's possible this year.
Yeah. For reference, CLG in 2021 combined was 12 and 33. That team looked hopeless.
Yeah.
They didn't even get last place in spring. They went 5 and 13. This team looked hopeless, and they had a 26% win rate. 26%. By comparison, right now in this split, TSM is at 15%, right? Half the win percentage practically, and they look less hopeless than CLG did last year, from my memory anyway.
There we go. Just a couple TSM apologists.
TSM apologists.
Yeah. You're in last place, still got to find something positive to say. Where's the fun in that? Okay. Thank you for coming on, Phreak. This was a really fun conversation. For everybody else, I'm always going to be doing these episodes the day after, the morning after LCS, and frequently releasing midweek episodes if there's any emerging topics that come out. So be on the lookout for those. If you want to know where those are, I always tweet them. You can also subscribe to the channel. That's a really good way of finding them.
Ring the bell.
You can do all that YouTube stuff. Yeah, or Spotify or Apple Podcast stuff. So please do. Thanks again for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.